A century ago, Argentina was an economic giant. At its peak in the 1920s, it was one of the fastest growing economies in the world, among the 10 richest countries on a per capita basis at the time. Investors and millions of immigrants flocked to Argentina to get a piece of the profit pie. But today, Argentina has lost its economic shine, the nation plagued with high inflation. The country's inflation rate increased to 160% in November, year on year, and this year, the upward trend has continued. Analysts fear it's on its way to hyperinflation, which it hasn't seen since it hit an average annual rate of 2,600% between 1989 and 1990. New President Javier Milei, in an aggressive effort to bring inflation under control, has devalued the peso by over 50%, hoping to improve domestic productivity and boost exports by making them more competitive.
The official exchange rate will go to 800 pesos so that productive sectors have the right incentives to increase their production. This will be accompanied by a temporary increase in the country's tax on imports and withholding taxes on non-agricultural exports. In this way, exporters benefit with a better price and we equalize the tax burden for all sectors and stop discriminating against the agricultural sector.
The government has also announced cutting energy subsidies and cancelling tenders for public works.
We are going to reduce energy and transport subsidies. Today, the state artificially supports low energy and transport prices through subsidies. Politics has always done this because in this way, it deceives people into believing that they are putting money in their pockets. But as all Argentines will have realized by now, these subsidies are not free. They are paid for with inflation. The national state is not going to tender any more new public infrastructure and is going to cancel the approved tenders whose development has not yet started.
This is all in an effort to reduce the fiscal deficit and make sure the country has enough funds to pay off their $45 billion debt to the International Monetary Fund, $10.6 billion of which is due by April next year. But as the cost of imports rises due to a depreciated pesos and the cost of energy and transport no longer subsidized, this will cause further inflation in the short term. And with 4 in 10 Argentinians living below the poverty line, the decision will make many lives even more difficult.
Quite impactful. I believe it's going to hit the people as a whole, affecting our entire economy. I think the retail sector where I work will bear the brunt of the impact.
The government hopes by reducing spending and improving domestic productivity by making exports more competitive, inflation will start to come down. But for now, rising prices look like a reality Argentinians will face long into the future. Emre Boz, TRT World.
For more on this now, we are joined by Remy Pierre live from Miami. He is a senior partner at Emily Advisory. Thank you very much for your time with us today. Right, so radical solutions to fix the country's worst economic crisis in decades. Can you help us understand this Milei-nomics better, or as it was called by some analysts, this shock therapy, really?
No, absolutely. I mean, this is the right term to describe these. I mean, the positioning from Milei is that the only way to pull Argentina out of the hyperinflation it's been facing is to cut drastically into a series of spendings and cut down also on the value of the peso. So it's kind of a no. Before him, you had the Alberto Fernandez administration, but even before, you had the Macri administration, which was a center right wing administration that tried to make some reforms, but very steadily at a slow pace. And Milei believed that actually was not the solution. It should have been much more drastic from the get go. So what he's trying to do is to be much more strong and firm on his reforms, cutting down by 50% the value of the peso, cutting down by almost 50% the numbers of different ministries, and especially subsidies for a series of transportation and energy costs, and hoping that this will actually create the trust from international market and allow Argentina down the road to rebound and attract investors.
Interesting. Devaluing the peso 50%. Do you think this will be effective in tackling hyperinflation per se?
I mean, it could be, I mean, it's drastic, so it could be quite the shock therapy needed. The cost and social cost of it is actually very strong, and very much depends on who, is facing this situation. A lot of the Argentinian economy is already dollarized and is already, with salaries based on term values of the peso. So the high level of society might not be impacted by this. But when you look at, the everyday workers or the pensions, retirees, they will see their entire, capacity of spending slashed by 50%. So the reaction from the streets, the potential impact on domestic consumption might be strong. Hopefully, this will be offset, as the perspective from Milei, by encouraging more investment, by strengthening the capacity of exports of Argentina, because obviously with a lower peso, you also have the capacity to compete stronger on international market. The capacity of Milei to develop those markets internationally, to kind of protect a little bit, at least the most poor part of the society, would be very important to be able to assess the political stability and the capacity to have mid to long-term positive impact. In the short run, yes, shock therapy can actually bring some key impact on the strengthening of the economy of Argentina. But in the long run, it might actually hold a series of inequalities and concerns that might actually be overly negative down the road.
That's interesting. On your point on the domestic economy that you were making, the planned measures, they drew praise from the IMF, but criticisms, right, from some progressive activists. Why is that? Does this have anything to do with the impact that all of this will have on the real economy, on the domestic economy?
I mean, Argentina is known to have a large list of different subsidies, especially on energy costs, on transportation. This was meant to help some, part of the societies that could hardly, make ends meet, to be able to go to their work in the morning, for example, things like this. And this is what Milei is cutting down, saying clearly that to him, there's no money in the Argentinian coffers for this. The IMF obviously applauds to this perspective, and because it actually also somewhat allows important reforms on the fiscal policy of Argentina that has been praised, especially on energy subsidies and demanded by the IMF. The question is, how do you strengthen the economy to be able to build new jobs and attract, as I was saying, investors either into the natural resources sphere. Energy, for example, is also very important, so that you can offset and create more jobs or facilitate a rise in salaries in domestic currency to offset those negative impact.